Breaking news in the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case. 7 months after 2 young children vanished from their rural Nova Scotia home, shocking new details have emerged that are turning this investigation completely upside down. Court documents that were sealed for months have finally been released, revealing information that investigators desperately tried to keep hidden. Information that changes everything. We thought we knew about what happened on May 2nd, 2025. Information that raises disturbing questions about the timeline, about the witness statements, and about what really occurred in that isolated house on Gairloch Road before 2 children disappeared without a trace. This isn't just another update. This is a complete re-examination of a case that has haunted Canada for 7 months. A case where nothing adds up, where every answer leads to 3 more questions, where the more we learn, the less sense it makes. And today, we're going to break down every single piece of new information that's come to light, connect the dots that investigators have been quietly assembling, and ask the questions that need to be asked about what happened to 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and 4-year-old Jack Sullivan. Before we dive into these bombshell revelations, you need to subscribe to True Crime Vault right now and hit that notification bell. We've been following the Sullivan case since day one, bringing you updates that mainstream media won't cover, asking questions others are afraid to ask, and demanding answers for 2 children who deserve justice. If you want the most in-depth, unflinching coverage of cases that matter, subscribe now. And smash that like button because your engagement pushes this case into more feeds, reaches more people, and increases the chances that someone with critical information will finally come forward. Drop a comment below with your thoughts as we go through this information. What do you think really happened? The comment section is where we piece this together as a community. Now let's get into the details that are shaking this case to its foundation. To understand why these new revelations are so explosive, we need to briefly recap what we know about the morning of May 2nd, 2025. According to the official story provided by Malehia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel, the children's mother and stepfather, Lily and Jack, were at home that morning because Lily had a cough. The children had been kept home from school for multiple days. Lily was 6 years old, born in March 2019. Jack was 4 years old, born on October 29, 2020. They lived with their mother, their stepfather, and their 1-year-old half-sister Meadow in a remote property in Lansdowne Station, Pictou County, Nova Scotia. The property itself is crucial to understanding this case. This wasn't a suburban home with neighbors watching from next door. This was an isolated rural property surrounded by dense wilderness, steep ravines, and thick forest that could easily hide secrets. The kind of place where what happens inside stays inside, where screams wouldn't be heard, where nobody would notice unusual activity at odd hours. Daniel Martel's mother, Janie Mackenzie, lived in a separate building on the same property, but she had her own space, her own routine, and wasn't constantly monitoring what was happening in the main house. According to the timeline provided by the parents, sometime between 8 a.m. and 9:40 a.m. on May 2nd, while both adults were allegedly in the bedroom with their 1-year-old daughter Meadow, the 2 older children vanished. The parents claim they heard Lily going in and out of the room several times during this period. They could hear Jack in the kitchen, the sounds of a young child moving around, maybe getting himself something to eat or drink. Normal morning sounds, normal activity, the kind of background noise that happens in any household with young children. And then suddenly they noticed the house had gone silent. Too silent. Parents of young children know that silence is often more alarming than noise. When kids are quiet, they're usually up to something. But this wasn't mischievous silence. This was absence. A void where there should have been the constant chatter and movement of childhood. When they investigated, when Malehia and Daniel emerged from the bedroom to check on the children, Lily and Jack were gone. Not in their rooms. Not in the kitchen where Jack had been heard moments before. Not anywhere in the house. Simply gone. The story was that Lily and Jack had somehow exited through a backsliding door and wandered into the dense, dangerous wilderness surrounding their property. Daniel Martel claimed he had placed a wrench on top of the front door the night before as a makeshift security measure, and that wrench was still in place undisturbed, so the children couldn't have left through the front door. The only explanation, according to Martel, was that they'd used the backsliding door, which he said normally operated silently. At 10:01 a.m., Malehia Brooks Murray called 911 to report her children missing. Within hours, a massive search operation was launched. Over 100 volunteers showed up. Police officers from multiple detachments, specialized search and rescue teams, cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains, helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras that could detect body heat even through moderate tree cover, drones flying grid patterns over areas too dense or dangerous for ground teams, days of intensive searching through brutal terrain, through forests so thick you couldn't see 10 meters ahead, through ravines and underbrush in areas where even experienced searchers had to move slowly to avoid injury. And they found nothing. Not a single trace of two small children. No footprints beyond the immediate property that could definitively be attributed to Lilly and Jack. No torn clothing snagged on branches. No belongings dropped along a trail. No scent trail that the highly trained cadaver dogs could follow for any significant distance. It was as if the children had simply evaporated into thin air from that backyard. The dogs would pick up faint traces near the house but then lose the trail completely, as if the children had never entered that forest at all. From the very beginning, people following this case closely felt something was profoundly wrong. The timeline didn't make sense. How do two children, one of them allegedly sick enough to be kept home from school, suddenly decide to embark on a wilderness adventure? How do they move so quickly and so far that trained search teams with dogs and helicopters can't find a single trace? How does a 4-year-old navigate terrain that adults find challenging? The explanations were too convenient, too neat. The behavior of the parents seemed off to many observers. The emotional displays seemed performative rather than genuine, though grief manifests differently in different people, and it's dangerous to judge based on appearances alone. And now, with these new document releases and investigative revelations, those instincts that something was deeply wrong are being validated in ways nobody could have predicted. Let's start unpacking the bombshells one by one. The most shocking revelation that emerged from the recently unsealed court documents is the extent of the forensic investigation conducted on the family property. We now know that police executed multiple search warrants on the family home and on vehicles associated with Malahia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel. These weren't casual walkthroughs. These weren't consent searches where police asked permission to look around. These were full forensic examinations authorized by judges who reviewed evidence presented by investigators and determined there was probable cause to believe those locations contained evidence of a crime. Think about what that means from a legal standpoint. For a judge to sign a search warrant, police must present sworn testimony or affidavits laying out specific facts that give rise to a reasonable belief that evidence of criminal activity will be found in the location to be searched. They can't just say, "We have a hunch," or "This seems suspicious." They need concrete reasons. So what did investigators tell the judge that convinced them to authorize these searches? What evidence had they already gathered that pointed toward criminal activity inside that home? The documents reveal that investigators were specifically searching for biological evidence: blood, hair, fibers, tissue, any indication that something violent had occurred inside that house. They were looking for signs that could only be left behind if someone had been injured or killed there. Luminol testing would have been conducted, spraying chemicals that react with blood even after it's been cleaned, causing it to glow under UV light. Even if someone scrubs a floor or a wall until it looks spotless, luminol can reveal blood that's invisible to the naked eye. Forensic teams would have examined drains because blood goes down drains and leaves traces that are almost impossible to completely remove. They would have looked at carpets, furniture, mattresses. They would have taken samples from anywhere that showed potential signs of biological material. And here's what's particularly disturbing about the timing. These search warrants were executed not in the immediate hours after the disappearance, but weeks later, after investigators had time to analyze the initial statements from Malahia and Daniel, after they'd interviewed witnesses, after they'd started to see the cracks in the official story, after they'd determined that the narrative about children wandering into the wilderness didn't hold up under scrutiny. That delay is strategic. In the immediate aftermath, when police first arrived on May 2nd, they were operating under the assumption this was exactly what the parents said it was: children who had wandered off. The initial search was focused on finding lost kids in the wilderness. But as days passed and no trace was found, as investigators dug deeper into the family's background and timeline, the focus shifted. This wasn't about lost children anymore. This was about potential foul play. And that's when the forensic searches of the property began in earnest. The newly released documents also reveal that cell phone data played an absolutely crucial role in the investigation, and what was found raises questions that Malahia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel have never adequately answered. Police obtained and analyzed cell phone records for both of them. And this wasn't just a casual review of call logs. This was comprehensive digital forensics. Call records showing who they communicated with and when. Text message content, including deleted messages that forensic specialists can often recover from phone memory or from carrier databases. Location data derived from cell tower pings, showing where the phones physically were at specific times. Internet search history revealing what they were looking up online. App usage showing what applications they were using and when. While the specific contents of what was found in this digital forensic analysis have been heavily redacted from the public documents, the fact that this level of investigation was deemed necessary tells us that investigators believed the phones might contain evidence of planning, coordination, or cover-up. Think about how we use our phones today. They're essentially detailed logs of our lives. Every search we make, every website we visit, every message we send, every place we go with the phone in our pocket, all of it is recorded and can be retrieved by forensic specialists. And here's something that hasn't been widely reported until now. Information that's come from multiple sources close to the investigation who spoke on condition of anonymity. Internet search history from devices in the home included deeply disturbing queries in the days before the children disappeared. We can't reveal the specific searches due to the ongoing nature of the investigation, and the fact that this information could be critical evidence if charges are ever filed. But let's just say they involve topics that no parent of healthy, safe children would have any legitimate reason to be researching. These searches involved wilderness survival, but not from the perspective of someone planning a camping trip. They involved cold weather exposure and how long children can survive in those conditions. They involved search and rescue procedures, what methods police use to find missing people, how extensive searches typically are. They involved how investigations into missing children are conducted, what evidence investigators look for, what mistakes people make that lead to getting caught. These aren't casual curiosity searches. These aren't someone reading a news article and clicking related links. These are targeted searches suggesting someone was thinking very carefully about what happens when children go missing, how searches are conducted, what evidence investigators look for, and how to avoid detection. Now, it's theoretically possible these searches were innocent. Maybe someone was watching a true crime documentary about missing children and got curious about investigative procedures. Maybe someone was reading news articles about other cases and went down a rabbit hole of related information. But the timing is what makes this so incredibly suspicious. These searches occurred in the 72 hours before Lilly and Jack were reported missing. In the 3 days leading up to May 2nd, someone in that household was researching topics directly related to missing children and police investigations. That's not coincidence. That's preparation. When investigators confronted both Malahia and Daniel about these searches, the responses were vague and inconsistent. One claimed not to remember making such searches. The other suggested it might have been research for something unrelated. Neither provided a credible explanation for why those specific topics were being researched at that specific time. And when people can't explain their own internet search history, when they claim not to remember or deflect with implausible explanations, investigators take note. That goes in the file as consciousness of guilt, behavior indicating someone knows they've done something wrong. The court documents also revealed extensive new information about the polygraph examinations that were conducted as part of the investigation. Polygraph tests, commonly called lie detectors, measure physiological responses including heart rate, blood pressure, respiration rate, and skin conductivity. The theory is that when someone lies, especially about something serious, their body produces stress responses that can be measured. Now, polygraphs aren't perfect. They can be fooled by people who are extremely calm or who've trained themselves not to react. They can show false positives when someone is very nervous, even though they're telling the truth. That's why polygraph results aren't admissible as evidence in Canadian courts. But they're still valuable investigative tools that can help police focus their efforts and sometimes pressure guilty parties into confessing. We now know that both Malahia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel were asked to submit to polygraph examinations. This is standard procedure in cases involving missing children. Police want to eliminate the parents as suspects, and a past polygraph can help do that. It's not definitive proof of innocence, but it's a data point. Malaya Brooks Murray agreed to be tested and underwent the examination. The specific results have not been made public, which is standard, and Canadian law prevents police from revealing polygraph results without the subject's consent. But sources close to the investigation indicate that investigators were not satisfied with the outcome of her examination. What does that mean? When a polygraph examiner analyzes results, they're looking at the physiological responses to specific questions. Control questions establish baseline reactions. Then, relevant questions are asked. Did you harm Lily? Did you harm Jack? Do you know where Lily and Jack are? Are you lying about what happened on the morning of May 2nd? Are you withholding information from police? Each question produces measurable physiological responses, and examiners compare those responses to the baseline to determine if deception indicators are present. If Malaya showed significant deception indicators on key questions, that wouldn't prove she harmed her children or knows where they are, but it would tell investigators she's not being truthful, that there's more to the story than she's sharing. It would direct them to press harder, to dig deeper, to find out what she's hiding. The fact that sources indicate investigators were not satisfied with her polygraph results suggests she showed deception on critical questions. That doesn't make her a murderer, but it makes her someone with guilty knowledge, someone who knows more than she's saying. Daniel Martel's polygraph situation is even more interesting and raises even more questions. According to information that's emerged from the unsealed documents and from investigative sources, Martel initially agreed to take a polygraph examination. This was in the early days of the investigation, when police were still treating this as missing children who'd wandered off, when cooperation seemed like the smart move for innocent parents desperate to find their kids. But then Martel delayed. He said he needed to think about it, needed to talk to a lawyer, needed time. Then he reportedly placed conditions on his cooperation that made the test impractical or impossible under standard protocols. Eventually, based on legal advice, he appears to have refused the examination altogether. Now, let's be absolutely clear about something. Refusing a polygraph is anyone's legal right. You cannot be compelled to take a polygraph examination. Defense attorneys often advise clients not to take them because the tests are unreliable, because innocent people can fail them if they're nervous, because the results can be used against you in the court of public opinion, even though they're not admissible in court. So refusing a polygraph does not indicate guilt. Plenty of innocent people refuse them on principle or on legal advice. But in the context of this case, the optics are terrible. You're the stepfather of 2 missing children. Police are asking you to take a test that could potentially clear you of suspicion. You initially agree, then back out. What message does that send? To investigators, it sends the message that you're afraid of what the test might reveal. It suggests you know you won't pass, that you're hiding something, that you can't afford to have deception indicators on record even if they're not admissible in court. To the public, it looks even worse. People see a stepfather who won't take a test that could clear him, and they draw conclusions about why he's refusing. Here's another absolutely explosive detail from the documents that fundamentally changes our understanding of the timeline. We knew that the last confirmed sighting of the children was the Dollarama security footage from May 1st at 2:25 p.m. That's been reported. What wasn't known until now is that investigators obtained additional surveillance footage from multiple other businesses and traffic cameras along the route the family traveled that day. They pieced together a comprehensive movement timeline using various camera sources. Traffic cameras at intersections captured the family vehicle at multiple points throughout the afternoon of May the 1st. Security cameras from other businesses in New Glasgow showed the family's movements. And here's what's critically significant. Investigators were able to establish that the vehicle was seen returning to the Lansdowne area at approximately 4:15 p.m. on May 1st. That gives us a much more precise timeline than we had before. The children were definitively, verifiably alive at 2:25 p.m. when security cameras at Dollarama captured them with the family. The family was back in the Lansdowne area, heading toward their property by 4:15 p.m. based on traffic camera footage. That's about a 2-hour window that's fully accounted for by objective evidence. But then what happened? According to Malaya and Daniel, they went home, spent a normal evening with the children, put them to bed somewhere between 9 and 10 p.m. depending on which version of the story you believe, and everything was fine until the next morning when the children mysteriously vanished. But here's the problem. Nobody outside that household saw those children after 4:15 p.m. on May 1st. Not one single independent witness. Not Janie McKenzie, Daniel's mother, who lived on the property. She didn't report seeing them that evening. Not any neighbors, though admittedly the property was isolated, so neighbors wouldn't necessarily see them anyway. Not anyone delivering mail or packages. Not anyone driving by, nobody. The children were verifiably alive at 4:15 p.m. based on objective evidence that can't be disputed. They were reported missing at 10:01 a.m. the next morning. That's 17 hours and 46 minutes where only two people, Malechia Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell, claim to know what happened. 17 hours and 46 minutes with no independent verification that those children were alive. That's an enormous window of time. And everything that supposedly happened during that window, the normal evening, the bedtime, the night passing uneventfully, all of it relies entirely on the word of two people whose accounts have inconsistencies and whose behavior has raised red flags. The documents reveal that investigators found this gap deeply, profoundly troubling. They interviewed Janie McKenzie extensively, conducting multiple formal interviews over the course of weeks. They pressed her on exactly what she saw and heard on the evening of May 1st and the morning of May 2nd. And here's where her testimony becomes absolutely critical to understanding this case. Her initial statement was that on the morning of May the 2nd, around 8:50 a.m., or shortly thereafter, she heard the children playing on the swings in the backyard. She heard children's laughter. She heard the rhythmic creaking of swing chains. She heard what sounded like young kids having fun on a spring morning. And she went back to sleep, comforted by those normal sounds. But under further questioning, under pressure from investigators who needed to know exactly what she could verify, Janie McKenzie admitted something crucial. She didn't actually see the children that morning. She never looked out the window to visually confirm it was Lilly and Jack on those swings. She never went outside to interact with them. She was in her separate building, lying in bed, heard sounds she interpreted as children playing, and assumed it was her grandchildren. She heard laughter. She heard swings moving, but she never laid eyes on them. This distinction is absolutely critical. Because if Janie McKenzie didn't actually see Lilly and Jack on the morning of May 2nd, then we have no independent verification that those children were alive that morning. All we have are sounds, and sounds can be replicated. This might sound like a conspiracy theory, like we're reaching for implausible explanations. But think about it practically. If you needed to create the illusion that children were outside playing when they actually weren't, how would you do it? You could play recordings of children's laughter. You could push swings yourself to create the creaking sound. You could make noise that someone hearing from a distance, not seeing the source, would interpret as kids playing. Why would someone do that? To establish a timeline. To create witnesses who could testify they heard the children alive at a certain time. To push the apparent time of disappearance forward, creating distance between when something bad actually happened and when it was reported. If the children died on the evening of May 1st or during the night, if something terrible happened in those 17 hours and 46 minutes when no one saw them, then the people responsible would need to explain why they didn't report it immediately. But if they could create evidence suggesting the children were alive the next morning, if they could get witnesses to say they heard them playing at 8:50 a.m. or 9 a.m., then the story of them wandering off around 9:40 a.m. becomes more plausible. Investigators absolutely considered this possibility. They looked at whether the sounds Janie heard could have been manufactured. They examined whether it was feasible for someone to create auditory evidence of children playing without the children actually being there. And the conclusion they reached, though it's not explicitly stated in the documents, is that yes, it's absolutely possible. Which means Janie's testimony, while well-meaning and honest on her part, doesn't actually prove the children were alive on the morning of May 2nd. She heard sounds. She interpreted those sounds as her grandchildren playing. But she cannot verify that's what the sounds actually were. Now let me be clear about something. I'm not accusing Janie McKenzie of lying or being complicit in anything. By all accounts, she's a victim in this case too. A grandmother who lost her grandchildren and has to live with the horror of what may have happened. She reported what she heard in good faith. But investigators have to look at testimony critically, have to ask whether what a witness believes they heard or saw can actually be verified. And in this case, it can't. The documents also shed new light on what the search efforts found, and more importantly, what they didn't find. We knew that the massive ground searches of the wilderness surrounding the property found no trace of the children. Hundreds of people searching for days through dense forest. No footprints that could definitively be attributed to Lilly and Jack beyond the immediate property line. No torn pieces of clothing, no dropped belongings, no broken vegetation suggesting small bodies had pushed through underbrush. No scent trails that the cadaver dogs could follow. But what wasn't publicly known until now is that cadaver dogs didn't just search the woods. They also searched the property itself in detail. Cadaver dogs are extraordinary animals trained to detect the scent of human decomposition in incredibly minute quantities. They can find remains buried deep underground. They can detect decomposition scent in water. They can alert to residual scent even if a body has been moved, cleaned up, or removed days or weeks earlier. The chemical signature of human decomposition lingers, and these dogs can detect it even after extensive cleaning efforts. According to the documents, cadaver dogs were brought onto the Sullivan property multiple times over the weeks following the disappearance. They searched the main house room by room. They searched the outbuildings, including the structure where Janie Mackenzie lived. They searched vehicles. They searched the yard, the areas around the swings and play equipment, the perimeter of the forest. And here's what's significant. The dogs showed interest in specific areas, but didn't give full alerts that would indicate the definite presence of human remains. What does that mean in practical terms? When a cadaver dog detects decomposition scent strongly enough to be certain, it gives a trained alert, typically sitting or lying down at the source of the scent, indicating to the handler that remains are present. But sometimes dogs show interest without giving a full alert. They might sniff intensely at a location, might paw at it, might circle and return to it, showing that they're detecting something but not at levels strong enough for a definitive alert. The dogs showed this kind of interest behavior in several locations on the property. Areas inside the house, areas in the yard, areas near the tree line where the property met the forest. What does that mean? It could mean the dogs detected something, a faint scent or trace, but not at levels strong enough to constitute a confirmed finding. It could mean something happened in those locations, something involving human decomposition, but the evidence was cleaned or removed before the dogs arrived days later. Or it could mean the dogs picked up on other scents, decomposing animal remains or other biological material that created interest responses but weren't actually human remains. Forensic teams collected samples from every area where the dogs showed interest. Soil samples, swabs from floors and walls, material from drains. All of it was sent to laboratories for detailed analysis. They were looking for traces of human DNA, for chemical markers that indicate decomposition, for blood residue that might have been cleaned but left microscopic traces. The results of that analysis have not been made public, and in fact, most of the information about what was found is redacted from the released documents. That suggests either they found nothing conclusive enough to use as evidence, or they found something that's being held as potential evidence for future prosecution and can't be revealed without compromising the case. The fact that we don't know which of those scenarios is accurate is incredibly frustrating for everyone following this case, but it's a reality of how investigations work. Evidence has to be protected. If police reveal everything they know, they tip their hand to potential suspects, give them the opportunity to create explanations or destroy additional evidence. So we're left with partial information, with knowing that tests were conducted but not knowing the results, with understanding that investigators were looking for signs of human remains on that property, but not knowing whether they found them. Here's another revelation from the documents that paints a deeply concerning picture of what was happening in that household before the children disappeared. Investigators interviewed teachers and staff from the school that Lilly and Jack attended. Elementary school teachers spend hours with their students every day. They notice things. Changes in behavior, signs of distress, unexplained injuries, children who seem fearful or withdrawn. And what the teachers reported to investigators was troubling. While specific details are redacted to protect privacy and because this information could be evidence, it's been reported by sources close to the investigation that there were concerns about the children's appearance and behavior in the weeks and months before they vanished. Teachers noted that the children sometimes came to school in clothing that wasn't seasonally appropriate or that appeared to have been worn multiple days in a row. Jack in particular sometimes had unexplained bruises or marks. When teachers asked about injuries, the explanations given were always plausible on the surface. He fell off his bike. He bumped into something while playing. He's a clumsy kid who gets hurt a lot. But elementary school teachers are mandated reporters. They're trained to recognize signs of abuse or neglect. And when injuries are frequent, when explanations don't quite add up, when a child seems fearful or withdrawn, teachers are supposed to report their concerns to Child Protective Services. And according to the documents, at least one teacher did exactly that. Weeks before Lilly and Jack disappeared, a formal concern report was filed with Nova Scotia's Child Protective Services regarding bruising observed on Jack that he either couldn't or wouldn't explain adequately. What happened with that report? This is where the system failed tragically. Child Protective Services in Nova Scotia, like in most jurisdictions across North America, are chronically overwhelmed and understaffed. Social workers carry caseloads that are double or triple what they should be. They're triaging constantly, prioritizing cases where children are in immediate clear danger. A report about bruising that could have innocent explanations from a family that wasn't previously known to the system might get a file opened and a note to follow up, but not immediate intervention. We don't know if a social worker ever visited the Sullivan home before the children disappeared. We don't know if Malaya and Daniel were ever interviewed about the concerns the teacher raised. We don't know if Jack was ever examined by a medical professional to determine if the bruising pattern was consistent with accidental injury or suggested abuse. The details of what Child Protective Services did or didn't do are sealed, protected by privacy laws designed to protect families from having their child welfare investigations made public. But the fact that there was a report, that there were documented concerns about these children before they vanished, adds another layer of tragedy to this case. Were there warning signs that were missed? Could intervention have saved Lilly and Jack's lives? If a social worker had visited, had seen something concerning, had removed the children from the home temporarily while an investigation was conducted, would they still be alive today? We can't know. But it's a question that haunts everyone involved in this case, from the teacher who made the report to the investigators trying to find out what happened. The documents also revealed tensions and problems within the family that hadn't been publicly known before. Extended family members, aunts and uncles and cousins and in-laws were interviewed by police. Some of these interviews lasted hours. Investigators were building a comprehensive picture of the family dynamics, trying to understand what life was like for Lilly and Jack, what stresses the adults in the household were under, whether there were risk factors that might have contributed to whatever happened. And what emerged from those interviews was a picture of a family under significant strain. Multiple family members described the relationship between Malaya Brooks Murray and Daniel Martel as volatile and unstable. There were frequent arguments, sometimes loud enough that family members visiting the property could hear them. The arguments were about various things: money, always money, parenting disagreements, jealousy and trust issues, the stress of caring for 3 young children while barely scraping by financially. Several family members expressed concern about Daniel Martel specifically. He was described by some as having a temper, as sometimes being too harsh with the children, as struggling with employment instability, and possibly with substance use. Now, these are second-hand observations from family members who may have had their own biases and agendas. None of them reported seeing direct abuse. None of them called Child Protective Services themselves, which suggests that whatever concerns they had weren't severe enough in their eyes to warrant intervention. But collectively, these interviews painted a picture of a household that was not the happy, normal family home that Malaya and Daniel tried to project to the outside world. One particularly disturbing detail that emerged from family interviews, and this has been reported by multiple sources. In the weeks before the disappearance, Malaya Brooks Murray reportedly told a family member that she was completely overwhelmed. That caring for 3 young children, including a 1-year-old who still required intensive care and attention, while also dealing with financial problems and relationship stress, was more than she could handle. She allegedly made a comment about wishing she could just start over, have a fresh start without all the complications and responsibilities weighing her down. Now, let's be careful about how we interpret that. Lots of parents, maybe most parents at some point, feel overwhelmed. Parenting is exhausting, especially of multiple young children. Parenting while poor, while in an unstable relationship, while dealing with the 1,000 daily stresses of life, is even harder. Saying you wish you could start over, that you need a break, that you're at the end of your rope. These are things frustrated parents say. It doesn't mean they're about to harm their children. It usually just means they need support, need help, need a moment to breathe. But in the context of children who then disappear, in the context of an investigation where police suspect those children were harmed rather than lost, those earlier statements take on a sinister significance. Was Malahia just venting normal parental frustration? Or was she expressing a mindset that could lead to terrible actions? Was she saying she wished for a simpler life? Or was she contemplating how to make that happen by removing the children from the equation? We can't read minds. We can't know what she truly meant. But investigators noted those statements, added them to the growing file of concerning information about this family. The unsealed documents also provided new information about the biological father, Cody Sullivan, and why he had no contact with his children for the 3 years before they disappeared. This is relevant because understanding the family's complete history helps us understand all the dynamics at play. Court records show that there had been a bitter, contentious custody dispute several years earlier when Malahia and Cody's relationship ended. Cody had lost parental rights due to problems in his own life at that time. Substance abuse issues, inability to provide stable housing, possibly some incidents involving police, though the details are sealed. The court determined he wasn't fit to have custody or even unsupervised visitation, and Malahia was granted full custody. But according to the documents, Cody had gotten his life together in the years since. He'd completed treatment programs, he'd maintained stable employment and housing, he'd stayed clean, and he'd been considering, in early 2025, just months before the children disappeared, petitioning the court to reinstate some level of parental rights. Maybe supervised visitation to start. Maybe working toward shared custody eventually. He wanted to be part of his children's lives again. Wanted Lilly and Jack to know their biological father. Some investigators explored whether that potential custody threat could have been a motive for Malahia or Daniel to make the children disappear. If Cody couldn't find the children, if they were gone, he couldn't petition for custody. He couldn't disrupt the family unit that Malahia had built with Daniel. It's a dark theory, but one that had to be considered. Parents have killed their children to prevent custody disputes before. It's rare, but it happens. But that theory fell apart quickly under investigation. Cody's alibi for the entire relevant time period was absolutely airtight. He was at his job, a construction site with multiple co-workers who could verify his presence, from early morning May 1st through the evening of May 2nd. Electronic time clock records showed him clocking in and out. His cell phone location data placed him in a completely different part of Nova Scotia, hours away from Pictou County. He had no accomplices that investigators could identify, no connection to anyone who could have helped him, no means to have orchestrated an abduction from that distance. And frankly, when investigators interviewed him after the children disappeared, when they watched him carefully for any sign of deception or guilty knowledge, all they saw was a man who was absolutely devastated. Cody Sullivan had lost his children years ago due to his own failings. He'd worked hard to rebuild his life, to become someone his kids could be proud of. He was planning to petition for the chance to be their father again. And now they were gone, missing, possibly dead. He broke down during interviews. He cooperated fully with every request. He volunteered to take a polygraph and passed. He gave DNA samples. He let police search his home and vehicle. He did everything a truly innocent person would do. Police cleared him completely. There was no involvement, no connection to the disappearance. But the fact that he existed, that there was a biological father who wanted his children back, adds complexity to the family dynamic. It adds a pressure point, a source of stress for Malahia and Daniel, something they might have worried about, might have resented. We can't know how much that factored into whatever happened, but it's part of the complete picture. Now let's talk about something that's emerged from the financial records, because this is where things get really interesting and really suspicious. The unsealed documents revealed that investigators obtained court orders to examine the family's financial records for the months leading up to the disappearance. Bank statements, credit card transactions, loan applications, any financial activity that might be relevant. And what they found raised serious questions. Malahia and Daniel were struggling financially. That much was already known. They were behind on rent. They had maxed out credit cards. Daniel had lost a job and was working only sporadically. Malahia had part-time employment, but it wasn't enough to support a family of 5. They were the kind of family living paycheck to paycheck, where one unexpected expense could mean choosing between paying rent or buying groceries. But here's what's newly revealed and deeply suspicious. In the 2 weeks before the children disappeared, there were unusual cash withdrawals from Malahia Brooks Murray's bank account. Not small amounts. We're talking about one withdrawal of $800, another of $600, a third of $450. These were large cash withdrawals that significantly depleted their already meager bank balance. Over $2,000 in cash withdrawn in the 2 weeks before May 2nd. What was that cash used for? When investigators asked Malahia about these withdrawals during interviews, she reportedly couldn't provide clear, specific explanations. She said it was for various expenses around the house. Said they needed things. Couldn't remember specifically what. Said maybe Daniel knows what it was for. But when investigators asked Daniel, he gave different answers. Said Malahia handled the finances. Said he didn't know about specific withdrawals. Said maybe it was for bills, though most of their bills were paid electronically, and there's no evidence of corresponding bill payments. Now, large cash withdrawals aren't inherently suspicious. People withdraw cash for all kinds of legitimate reasons. Maybe they prefer to budget with physical money. Maybe they were buying something from someone who only took cash. Maybe they lost track and withdrew more than they realized. But in the context of an investigation into missing children who may have been harmed, where investigators are looking for any indication of planning or unusual behavior, unexplained cash withdrawals totaling over $2,000 get serious attention. What could that money have been used for? If we're thinking darkly, if we're considering the possibility that something was planned, cash purchases leave no electronic trail. If you need to buy tools or supplies for something criminal, you pay cash. If you need to pay someone for assistance or silence, you pay cash. If you need to purchase cleaning supplies in large quantities, bags and tarps, a shovel, you pay cash from multiple stores so no one location sees suspicious bulk purchases. I'm speculating here, following the logic of what investigators would be thinking. But the fact is, over $2,000 in cash left that bank account in the 2 weeks before the children vanished, and no one can credibly explain where it went. The documents also revealed something that's absolutely explosive and that neither Malahia nor Daniel has ever adequately explained. Investigators obtained security footage from a gas station approximately 30 kilometers from the Sullivan property. That's about a 20-minute drive under normal conditions. The gas station is in a small community along one of the rural highways that connect various towns in Pictou County, and the footage, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m. on May 1st, the night before the children were reported missing, shows a vehicle matching the description of Daniel Martel's truck. The footage isn't perfect. It's nighttime. The lighting at small rural gas stations isn't always great, and the camera angles aren't ideal. But forensic video analysts who examined the footage determined there was a high probability, over 80% certainty, that the vehicle in the footage was Martel's truck. A dark-colored pickup truck with similar body style, similar modifications, and what appeared to be a matching license plate number, though the plate wasn't fully clear due to the camera angle. The footage shows a single male figure exiting the vehicle and pumping gas. The individual is wearing dark clothing, a hoodie pulled up, making facial identification difficult. But the build, the height, the mannerisms, all matched Daniel Martel. The individual pumps gas, then walks into the gas station's convenience store. Interior cameras captured him inside for approximately 4 minutes. He browsed various sections of the store, picked up items, put them back, appeared distracted or agitated based on body language analysis. He eventually purchased a few items and left. Now here's why this matters so much. According to Daniel Martel's statement to police, he was home all evening on May 1st. He said Malahia went to bed around 9 or 10 p.m., that he stayed up later but remained at the house watching television or on his phone. He made absolutely no mention of leaving the property that night. When investigators compile timelines in cases like this, they ask suspects to account for their time, hour by hour. Where were you? What were you doing? Who can verify it? Martel's timeline for the night of May 1st had him at home from dinner time through the entire night until the morning of May 2nd, when the children allegedly disappeared. So if that security footage shows him at a gas station at 11:47 p.m., 30 kilometers from home, he lied to police about his movements on the last night anyone can verify his stepchildren were alive. That's not a small detail. That's not a minor discrepancy. That's a provable, demonstrable lie about his whereabouts during a critical time period. When investigators confronted Daniel Martel with this security footage during later interviews, his response evolved in ways that only increased suspicion. Initially, he flatly denied it was him, said it must have been someone else with a similar truck, said the footage was too grainy to be sure, denied leaving the house that night. But when investigators pushed back, when they pointed out the license plate match and the physical similarity, when they made clear they were confident it was him, his story changed. Then he said, okay, maybe he did go out that night. He'd forgotten about it because of all the stress of the missing children. Maybe he went to get cigarettes or some snacks. It slipped his mind when he was giving his initial timeline. Just a quick trip to the store, nothing significant, that's why he forgot to mention it. But investigators checked. They looked at what that particular gas station sells. It's a small rural convenience store with limited inventory. They don't sell cigarettes, which is what Martel claimed he went to buy. And Martel's bank records show no debit or credit card transaction at that location that night. Which means if he did make a purchase, he paid cash. Cash from those unexplained withdrawals. The interior security footage from the gas station is frustrating because we can see the individual shopping, see him pick things up and look at them. But the camera angles don't clearly show what items were ultimately purchased. The store's transaction records from that night have been obtained, but without knowing the exact time of purchase down to the minute, and without knowing if it was a cash transaction, investigators couldn't definitively link a specific purchase to Martel. But let's think about what this all means. Daniel Martel left his house at approximately 11:30 p.m. on May 1st, based on the time it would take to drive 30 kilometers to that gas station. The children were supposedly in bed, asleep. Malahia was supposedly asleep. He drove to a gas station, bought something with cash, lied to police about it, then changed his story when confronted with evidence. Where did he go after the gas station? The footage shows him leaving, but there are no other cameras tracking his route home. Did he actually go straight home? Or did he go somewhere else? What was he doing that night? And why has he been unable or unwilling to provide a truthful, consistent account of his movements? These are questions that investigators desperately want answered. These are questions that make Daniel Martel look extremely suspicious. And these are questions he's either unwilling or unable to answer in a way that clears him. Another aspect of the investigation revealed in the documents involves soil analysis. And this is where things get particularly dark and disturbing. Forensic teams took soil samples from multiple locations on the Sullivan property. This is standard procedure in cases where investigators suspect human remains might have been buried on a property. They look for areas where the ground appears disturbed, freshly turned earth, areas where vegetation has been disrupted or removed, spots where the soil looks different from the surrounding terrain. The Sullivan property, like most rural properties in that area, has various outbuildings, cleared areas, and sections of yard. There are places where soil could be disturbed for any number of innocent reasons. Garden plots, areas where fence posts were installed or removed, spots where vehicles frequently drive and compact the earth. But forensic specialists are trained to identify disturbances that look different from normal property maintenance. According to the documents, soil samples were collected from at least 6 different locations on the property. Those samples were sent to laboratories for comprehensive analysis. What were they looking for? Chemical signatures that indicate decomposition. When a body decomposes, it releases specific chemicals into the surrounding soil. Cadaverine and putrescine, compounds created by the breakdown of proteins. Changes in soil pH. Elevated nitrogen levels. Bacterial activity patterns that differ from normal soil biology. Even if remains are removed after being buried temporarily, these chemical signatures can persist in the soil for months or even years. The results of those soil analyses are heavily redacted in the public documents. We know the tests were conducted. We know investigators were looking for evidence of human decomposition, but we don't know what they found. The redaction suggests one of 2 possibilities. Either the tests found nothing conclusive and there's no evidentiary value to revealing that publicly, or the tests found something significant that's being protected as potential evidence for future prosecution. If the tests had definitively ruled out human remains in all sampled locations, if they'd shown completely normal soil chemistry with no indication of decomposition, investigators would have less reason to keep that secret. The fact that the results remain sealed and redacted suggests they might have found something. Maybe not proof positive of human remains, but anomalies that are consistent with decomposition. Chemical markers that shouldn't be there. Soil disturbances that suggest something was buried and removed. Ground-penetrating radar was also deployed on the property, though this detail has barely been mentioned in public reporting. Ground-penetrating radar can detect subsurface anomalies, including voids in the soil where something has been buried, or areas where the soil density differs from surrounding areas. It's not perfect technology. It can produce false positives from tree roots, rock formations, buried trash. But combined with other evidence like cadaver dog interest and soil chemistry results, it can help investigators narrow down areas for potential excavation. Did they find anything with the ground-penetrating radar? Again, heavily redacted. We know it was used. We don't know the results. The fact that no large-scale excavation of the property has been reported suggests they didn't find anything definitive enough to justify digging up significant portions of the property. But the mere fact that they deployed this technology indicates the level of suspicion that Lilly and Jack's bodies might be buried somewhere on that property. Let's talk about what happened after Malahia Brooks Murray left the area in the days following the disappearance, because the documents shed new light on this and it's deeply concerning. We knew she went to stay with family in another part of Nova Scotia. We knew she blocked Daniel Martel on social media, but we now know much more about the context and the things she said while away from him. According to statements from family members who hosted her during that time, Malahia was emotionally devastated. She cried constantly, she barely ate, she couldn't sleep, all of which would be entirely expected behavior for a mother whose children have just vanished. But she was also angry, specifically angry at Daniel Martel. Family members reported hearing her say things like, "This is all his fault. He knows what happened to them. I should have protected them from him. I should have left him before this happened." These are extraordinarily significant statements. When a mother whose children are missing says that the stepfather knows what happened, that's not vague suspicion. That's an accusation. Even if it's not explicit, even if she's not saying he killed them, she's clearly indicating she believes he's responsible in some way. She's saying she should have protected the children from him, which suggests she perceived him as a threat to their safety. When police followed up on these statements, when they interviewed Malahia directly and asked her to explain what she meant, her responses became vague and evasive. She said she was just upset, wasn't thinking clearly, was looking for someone to blame because the pain was unbearable. She said she didn't mean anything specific by those comments. She said Daniel wasn't perfect, but she didn't actually think he'd harmed the children. She walked everything back, softened all the accusations, presented a united front. But investigators don't believe in unringing bells. When someone says something in an unguarded moment, when they express what they truly believe before they've had time to think about the implications or coordinate a story, that's often closer to truth than the carefully crafted statements that come later. Malahia's initial reaction was to blame Daniel, to say he knows what happened, to express regret that she didn't protect her children from him. Then, after some time passed, after presumably some communication with Daniel or his family despite the social media blocking, after perhaps consulting with a lawyer, she changed her tune. Why the change? One possibility is that her initial statements were made in grief and anger and didn't reflect what she truly believes. She was lashing out, looking for someone to blame, and Daniel was a convenient target. But investigators suspect something else. They suspect that Malahia knows or suspects Daniel's involvement, but she's also afraid. Afraid of him, perhaps. Afraid of being implicated herself if the truth comes out. Afraid of losing her surviving daughter if she's seen as an accomplice or as someone who failed to protect her children. The fact that Malahia and Daniel eventually reconciled, that they resumed living together, that they've presented a unified story to police and to the public, doesn't mean they're both innocent. It could mean they're both guilty and need to maintain their combined story. It could mean one is guilty and controlling the other through fear. It could mean they've made a conscious decision to protect each other regardless of the truth. Or it could mean they're both genuinely innocent, and the suspicions cast on them are tragically misplaced. We can't know which scenario is accurate based on public information, but the pattern of behavior, the initial accusations followed by walking them back, the separation followed by reconciliation, all of it suggests a complex dynamic that investigators are still trying to fully understand. The unsealed documents also reveal that police conducted extensive analysis of the family's social media accounts, text messages, and electronic communications. In the digital age, people's lives are documented extensively online. Photos, posts, comments, private messages. All of it can provide insight into what was really happening in a household, what people were thinking, what stresses they were under. What did investigators find? The specific contents are redacted, but we know they were looking for several things. Any indication that the parents were researching or discussing getting rid of the children. Any messages between Malaya and Daniel that suggested plans or coordination around the time of the disappearance. Any posts or messages that contradicted their public statements. Any evidence of deleted content that might be incriminating. Forensic digital analysts can recover deleted messages from phones and computers, can access backed up data from cloud services, can obtain records directly from service providers. Even if someone thinks they've erased something, it often still exists somewhere in digital form, and investigators have tools to find it. One detail that has emerged. In the weeks before the disappearance, there was a significant decrease in photos of the children being posted to social media. Malaya had previously been relatively active on Facebook, posting pictures of the kids, sharing updates about their activities, the normal things parents do online. But starting in mid-April 2025, about 2 weeks before the children vanished, the posts became less frequent. The photos of Lilly and Jack stopped almost entirely. Is that significant? Maybe. Maybe Malaya just got busy or lost interest in social media, or decided to be more private about her children's lives. But investigators noted the change, because sometimes when people are planning something terrible, when they're starting to see their children differently, the everyday celebrations of them stop. The proud parent posts stop. The affectionate photos stop. It's a subtle shift that can indicate a change in the relationship. There were also concerning text message exchanges between Malaya and Daniel in the days before May 2nd. The specific content is redacted, but sources indicate the messages showed significant relationship conflict, arguments about money, about parenting, about their future together. At one point, according to sources, there was a message exchange about whether they should split up, whether the relationship was worth continuing. These aren't unusual conversations for couples under stress, but the timing, right before the children disappeared, is notable. Were Malaya and Daniel considering separating? If so, what would that mean for custody of the children? They had a baby together, Meadow. But Lilly and Jack weren't Daniel's biological children. If the relationship ended, would he have any claim to them or obligation to support them? Would they go with Malaya, adding to her burden as a single mother trying to support 3 kids alone? Were the children seen as an obstacle to the relationship working, or to either party being able to move on to a fresh start? These are dark questions, but they're ones investigators have to ask, because children are sometimes harmed when parents see them as burdens, as obstacles to the life they want, rather than as the precious lives they're responsible for protecting. As of December 2025, 7 months after Lilly and Jack Sullivan vanished, we're left with more questions than answers despite all these revelations. We know the investigation has been exhaustive. We know investigators suspect something terrible happened to those children inside that house or on that property. We know there are inconsistencies in the parents' stories, suspicious behaviors, unexplained financial transactions, lies about movements on critical nights. But we also know that suspicion isn't proof. Inconsistencies aren't proof. Behavior that seems suspicious isn't proof. Without bodies, without physical evidence of a crime, without a confession, prosecutors may never feel confident they can secure a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the frustrating reality of this case. The investigation remains active and ongoing. The tip line is still open. The $150,000 reward still stands. Investigators haven't given up. They're still analyzing evidence, still following leads, still hoping for the breakthrough that would finally bring answers. But 7 months is a long time. Evidence degrades, memories fade. People who might have been willing to talk in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance become more hesitant as time passes. Secrets calcify into permanent silences. And with each day that passes, the chances of definitively solving this case diminish slightly. What can we conclude from all these new revelations? That this was never a simple case of children wandering into the wilderness. that investigators have suspected from early on that something criminal occurred, that the parents' behavior and statements have raised serious red flags, that there's evidence suggesting planning and cover-up, but that without the most critical piece of evidence, the children themselves, proving what happened may be impossible. Somewhere, Lilly and Jack Sullivan are waiting to be found. Whether they're hidden in the vast wilderness of Nova Scotia, whether they're buried on that property in a location searchers haven't discovered, whether they're somewhere else entirely, they deserve to be brought home. They deserve to be laid to rest with dignity. They deserve justice for whatever was done to them. And somewhere, someone knows the truth. Whether it's the person or persons responsible, whether it's someone who was told what happened, whether it's someone who saw something and hasn't realized its significance, someone has the information that could solve this case. The question is whether they'll come forward. Whether conscience or the substantial reward or the weight of carrying that secret will eventually motivate them to do the right thing. To anyone watching this who has any information about what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan, please contact the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The tip line is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can remain anonymous. You can call from anywhere. Even the smallest detail could be the piece that finally makes everything else make sense. $150,000 is being offered, but more important than any reward is the chance to bring 2 children home and ensure that whoever is responsible faces justice. What do you think about all these revelations? Do they change your perspective on what happened? Do you think the parents are responsible, or is there another explanation we're missing? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this deep dive valuable, if you want to see more thorough, honest coverage of cases that deserve attention, subscribe to True Crime Vault. We're committed to following this case until there are answers, no matter how long it takes. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, smash that like, and share this video. The more people who know about Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the better the chances that someone with information will finally speak up. Thank you for watching. Lilly Sullivan was 6 years old. Jack Sullivan was 4 years old. They've been missing for 7 months. The search for truth continues, and it won't stop until they're found and justice is served.